Well, good morning. It is October 4th, so we are fully immersed in the autumnal celebration, the celebration of having hit the peak and starting that downward slide into colorful trees and pumpkins and all sorts of autumnal decorations, and ultimately the death of all living things in the world of form. So how are you this morning, Barret?
Sounds great to me. I'm doing pretty good.
Well,
Yes.
you're a Scorpio, so you like that sort of thing, and I'm a Pisces. I can kind of get into that vibe too every once in a while, just because of its absurdity. It's such a silly notion.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a way, this month of Halloween and all of these ideas is very fitting, right? I mean, we think about what we do. We wear masks of scary characters, and they seem to frighten us, and especially if we're young little children, maybe they really frighten us. But then at some point we grow up and realize it's all fake, that none of this is real, and this is a kind of beautiful metaphor for our awakening to the truth with the course. So yeah, I'm feeling good, and I do love this time of year since my birthday is later on this month, and I've always loved Halloween too. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's. I think one of the things that this season affords us is the opportunity to come together. You see, even in the streets, you see people, with their garbage cans, fires going, and standing around, and there's a process that goes on at this time of the year where the cold forces us together, and it forces us to talk to each other, and pardon me, and it forces us to really look at the nature of what's going on around us. The trees are becoming bare, and within that, there's a revelation. The limbs become this poetic expression, and so this time of year is a year of a lot of you know almost like shape shifting processes going on around us. So that's why I think autumn has such appeal to so many people. And for me, the beginning of chestnut season is also a happy time.
Yes, yes, there are some beautiful things here in the world, right? It is a dualistic world, so we have the joy here too, and the bounty of the fall harvest. And in a sense, again, on a spiritual message, as we go forward, we start to reap the bounty of our spiritual work. For a long time, especially in the beginning, when we're doing this work, it can feel like we're planting a lot of seeds. We're working with these concepts and we're trying to apply them to the situations in our life, but it might feel like we don't have much to show for it, right? And in the gardening sense, that's often how it goes, right? We plant a lot of things under the ground and we water them and we water them and we wait and we wait. And then eventually we start to have the shoots come out, and it's beautiful and it's nice. And then even further down the road, we actually have the fruits and the harvest. And in a sense, you could say that we're planting the seeds for peace so that we can harvest that in our life and in our experience. And we can be sure that if we're patient and dedicated, that those plants will bear fruit. So this is part of our work too, is dedication and willingness and persistence. So yeah, a lot of good stuff.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'm always intrigued with is that this is the season when the veil has become very thin, and so people who have become disincarnate are theoretically floating around as ghosts and apparitions and that sort of thing. I don't know if I buy all of those stories in their entirety, but it definitely causes us to again look at that idea of, is our life connected to a body? Is that a determining factor in the exhibition of life on our behalf? And of course, the body being as fragile as it is, it is always vulnerable. We're always, 1 foot out of the grave, as it were. And so you do stop and wonder every once in a while, well, if my body goes south on me here, will I be like one of those spirits in A Christmas Carol dragging my chains around and bound to an earthly existence without a body?
Yeah, it is. It is kind of scary, and those images themselves are haunting, right? As they're often meant to. And I think the mind can sometimes experience itself as a ghost or an entity of some amount like that. But on a deeper level, that is still a body, right? Because a body is an idea of separation, and if you think you're a non-corporeal entity that is separate from something else, that's an idea of separation. There's still an idea of I am not whole, I am not complete, I am not one with eternity. So ultimately, we want to see that and maybe acknowledge that that may be our experience or the experience of others. But at some point, we do step beyond that. We do step into a state of really knowing that there are no walls, there are no borders, there are no limits. And again, as much as a part of us wants this, right, we consciously are desiring to know that experience of deep love. There's another part of us that is scared witless at the idea of melting into this formless nature that is our deeper truth. So this is sort of the ping pong nature. This is the bouncing back and forth that happens as we do this work. We take a step forward, we feel the pull towards love, and then we retreat in fear. And that retreat can take any number of forms. Any issue in our life where we are upset or angry, throwing our peace of mind out the door because something happened. These are the ways that shows up. And then these are also the classrooms that we learn the lesson that I want to go deeper. I want to go into this experience of love. And I think it leads very nicely into our topic for today, which is to look at section 27 in the Manual for Teachers. And the topic is, what is death? So it really kind of pulls back the curtains on what's going on here. So Jesus starts off by saying, death is the central dream from which all illusions stem. Is it not madness to think of life as being born, aging, losing vitality, and dying in the end? So we have asked this question before, but now we need to consider it more carefully. It is the one fixed, unchangeable belief of the world that all things in it are born only to die. So really here Jesus is helping us to see that what we think of as life, it's not real life, right? Because real life doesn't end. Real life doesn't suffer, doesn't fade, doesn't disappear. So what is he saying? Well, that the life that we think we're living here, this mortal physical life, is actually just a sham. It's actually just a cover to try to keep us away from our awareness of our truth. And in the end, it's not going to. But this is the purpose that the ego has made the body for. And then once we have this experience, we can shift into seeing the body as it is, which is as a vessel for us to learn and grow and come into a deeper experience of what we really are. So just to finish off this paragraph here, he says, this is regarded as the way of nature, not to be raised to question, but to be accepted as the natural law of life. The cyclical, the changing and unsure, the undependable and the unsteady, waxing and waning in a certain way upon a certain path. All of this is taken as the will of God, and no one asks if a benign creator could will this. So obviously the answer is no, right? God doesn't will this. God doesn't want us to suffer. God knows not of death. This is kind of like the really big foundational idea in the Course. And it helps us to start to step into these concepts more and more.
Very, very true. There's that old statement, there's only two things in this world that we can be assured of, and that's death and taxes. And so, Course in Miracles flips the first one. Death gets turned upside down. And I don't know, perhaps we'll arrive at a place where we don't worry about taxes too. So I think that it's humorous the way that the ego stages everything so that we are chained to circumstance. There's no wiggle room. There's no way to get out of the situations that this earthly life presents to us. And yet it is so simple. It's mindlessly simple, actually, to flip that whole process and just give up on trying to fix everything yourself and turn it all over to God, to just stop and rest in God. And all of a sudden, and this again is reiterated throughout the Course, all of a sudden, as soon as you do that, then there is a force that is so far beyond this realm of limitation that becomes active in your life, and you are suddenly carried like a leaf on a stream into different waters, into different conditions, into different experiences. So as we start to confront the idea of death, we also should certainly look at the idea of giving allowance for God to take over, to take charge of our day-to-day existence. Because as soon as we do that, our problems start getting solved on our behalf. And it's not that that's why we are seeking this better life within the realm of love, but it is one of the benefits of it, because all of a sudden God is going to take these distractions out of your path and put you on a vector towards something that is indescribable in earthly terms, because it simply is so above this mortal coil that we are all bound to. So as we go a little bit further down here, it says, in this perception of the universe as God created it, it would be impossible to think of him as loving. For who has decreed that all things pass away, ending in dust and disappointment and despair, can but be feared. And that is really one of the darker aspects of of Christianity throughout the ages, is, the old Judaical idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and the old process wherein we experience karma. It's like what goes around comes around. And so every time you step on an ant, you set yourself up for, a pain in the foot somewhere later on down the road. It's so perverse and yet so compelling that people buy into it. They believe in it. So really, death has a lot of different faces, and one of the darkest of those faces is the idea of justice, because in the earthly experience, justice is simply revenge with, window dressing taped around it. And we have to learn how to be honest as we are looking at the world around us, and be willing to acknowledge the fact that we have created a really dark experience here and designed it to become our own tomb. So as autumn unfolds and those leaves are falling, we feel ourselves falling in many ways every year at this particular time of the year. And then, of course, the darkness comes and winter sets in, and eventually we wake up to another cycle, another life. So all in all, it really is absurd, and yet we have created such a compelling story that we are stuck with it.
Yeah, and that's part of it, is how do we deal with the fact that some part of us is actually drawn to this? In chapter 19 of the text, Jesus talks about the obstacles to peace. And one of the obstacles to peace is the attraction of death. Now, he doesn't say the fear of death. He doesn't say the upset around death. He says the attraction, that we're actually drawn to it, we're actually pulled towards it. And in an unconscious way, we can see this. I mean, in our outer world, we can see it around, people's attraction to horror movies, people's attraction to violence in other movies, even in people's, kind of rubbernecking to look at an accident along the side of the road. There are a lot of ways we can kind of see it overtly, but it's very subtle within us too. And bringing it into the light is usually not a fun experience, right? We don't want to see a part of us that's actually drawn to people's suffering and pain and death. But a lot of times on the healing path, we at some point need to look at this and bring it forward, because there's no shadow that's going to last once we bring it into the light. It's only in the hiddenness that the shadow can survive. And the ego is like this. It has to be in the shade in order for there to be some fear, some seeming reality to it. But once it's brought forward, we just see it's not real. And we actually can start to have that experience with the idea of death itself. Now, this is kind of remarkable, right? Because death, like this is saying, just really seems like a fact here in the world. And it definitely is something that happens here. But it's not a fact in heaven. There has been no death in truth. There has been no separation in the oneness. And this is really what we're saying is when we get to that level, these falsities really start to have the unreality, the feeling of unreality, not just an intellectual understanding they're not real, but we start to actually open up into the knowing that this is so. And it really starts to change our experience here. And it helps us to open into much deeper experience of happiness, even in the face of death, or even in the face of pain. So yeah, it really changes our whole world. And he just goes on and on here about how there's really no space for both death and God. It's really one or the other. And he says, where there is death, is peace impossible. And a little further on, he says, death holds out an image of the Son of God, in which he is laid to rest in devastation's arms, where worms wait to greet him and to last a little while by his destruction. And he says a little further, and so do all things live because of death. Devouring is nature's law of life. God is insane, and fear alone is real. So he's really just emphasizing how these two thought systems that Jesus talks about over and over in the Course, they ultimately are there's no, if we drew a Venn diagram, they'd be two circles that don't overlap, right? And it's the thought system of love and truth, and it's the thought system of death and fear. So, in the next paragraph, he says, death denies life. This is a very simple, short sentence that explains, what's going on here. That the reason that we kind of cooked up this whole idea of separation was to believe that there was something other than true life, eternal life. And so it gave us this experience of a world of death and suffering. But we're waking up to the fact that this is not our real home, that our real home is in the loving God, and it is in this space of true eternity in heaven. But in order for us to come to that experience, we often have to look at these shadows. We have to look at these haunting images and start to, just like the child grows up and realizes they don't have to be scared, we're growing up and looking at these same images and starting to realize we don't need to fear here either. And this is what we just keep doing and keep practicing.
Absolutely. And the whole idea of, death is a natural cycle because it begets new life. When you are at that stage in your life experience where you actually go through the journey through death, and I have had that happen twice in my life, where I've had what is called a near-death experience, although one of them was prolonged, 6.5 days on a respirator. with all the doctors saying, well, we're going to unplug him because there's no brain activity and he's entirely gone. But the truth is, they unplugged me and I woke up. And of course, that doesn't do the reputations any good, but whatever. But nonetheless, the whole idea that God would set up a system wherein you go through the process of death in order to become reborn again is so absurd, because why would God force that pain and that fear and that trauma on a child that he loves? And most people who either have children or who have children around them, they may not be a biological parent, but they end up being put into the role of parenting, realizes, if they just stop and think about it, how idiotic Christianity's portrait of God really is. Because even those of us who are less than socially perfect still have that love and compassion, and still have that attunement to life that we see in the eyes of children. So within that process, if God is that much greater than we are in this perverse form that we're currently in, then, the possibility of death would not be anything that God could even entertain. God could not conceive of it. So we really have to look at the way the story is unfolding and be willing to question all of the things that we're seeing. It's, again, very much like All Hallows Eve, where all of these disembodied souls kind of rise up from the ground and roam the earth. Are we really experiencing that in the most literal sense by embracing the body? Because, even though we are not disincarnate, we're still roaming the earth looking for love and fearing that terminal point of death. And death does want to chase us into the grave. Death is all about that ego's concept, where the ego thinks it will survive, but it will kill that part of you that is the Christ within.
And when we boil death down to its, very basic parts, really what death is an ending. And what we're again going after is this idea that what is true is actually eternal and doesn't have any beginnings or endings. It is beyond the idea of time completely. And again, this is a hard concept to kind of be with, because it's actually almost beyond conceptualizing. But it points us in the right direction, because it helps us to see what is true and what is not. And again, the Course is all about helping us sort out the false from the true. So to make it very simple, what is true is only that which is eternal, unchanging, loving, and pure. And anything else is not true. And that means that basically everything here in our experience of the world is untrue, and that includes death. So that's really good news, right? Because our practice of the Course means that we are released from the idea of death itself. And that means we are reborn into this experience of real life, which is eternal, which is loving, which is kind. And so again, even though we're talking about some kind of hard concepts today, and they're not easy to look at or easy to think about, by looking at them with compassion and with kindness and with love, and even if death is showing up in our life, in our personal life, people we know, or even pets or loved ones, as they shift and make their transition, as we start to apply these principles, we can still do whatever people do, right? We can still be appropriate and wear black to a funeral and express your condolences. But a part of you knows that nothing has really happened. A part of you knows that there is really no loss. And it really exchanges the heavy sadness around death with this peace and this sense of deeper eternal light within ourselves. So it is a journey, but it's a journey worth taking, and it's a journey I'm glad we're discussing here today, Chris. This has been a really good conversation.
Yes, it's very appropriate because it's the season, and we do have to take on our mission in this lifetime, and that's reiterated in this last paragraph in the section we were reading. It says, "Teacher of God, your one assignment could be stated thus: accept no compromise in which death plays a part. Do not believe in cruelty, nor let attack conceal the truth from you. What seems to die has but been misperceived and carried to illusion." So that really is what all of us have to invest our complete existence in, is not to fend off the image of death, but to nothingize it in our mind, to look at it and declare that it has no power, and it never did have any power. And all the people and all the animals and all of creation that we think we have lost to death are with us in the most intimate way imaginable. So it was a great dialogue today, and you have a couple of things coming up here, right?
Yeah, this weekend is a Course in Miracles weekend. So first off, on Saturday morning, Charlie and I are doing our next Good News. The topic is Living the Course. So that's 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Central Time. And you can access it either by joining us in person here in the Chicago area, or you can join us online. So just you can register through a link online through my website, which is barretheaddean.com. You can also find information on this on my new website for A Course in Miracles, which is miraclesu.org. So that's miracles, the letter U, and then .org. And then, of course, on Sunday, you and I and Charlie and 3 other great Course in Miracles teachers are all coming together for an afternoon called Exploring the Course, where we're each going to be sharing about a topic from the Course and then doing some fun question and answer around any questions that people have. So that is also available online and in person. So yeah, be great to have you there, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the flesh.
Yes, the rotting flesh, which is very appropriate for Halloween.
Yeah.
Well, you're off on some adventures next week. You may be chatting with me from Germany. Who knows? That could be a possibility. And
We shall see. Yeah. But if not, hopefully you and Charlie at least can connect, and I will be able to rejoin the following week for sure.
Well, this is just amping up beautifully toward the next level of awakening. So have safe travels. I will see you over the weekend, and we will get this posted out there. I think this is a good discussion. I think people might need to hear some of these ideas again.
Yeah, definitely. Well, big love to you, and yeah, have a great day. See you on Sunday.
Sounds good. Bye.
All right, bye.